Also, talked about Rebel. Like, here's the deal with Rebel, and I think you, me, and Brian, and maybe Katie, since she'll write this thing. What we have to do is the biggest piece here is that we have to connect Amanda Ghost with Wlotnik. And I was just like, so basically what we need to do is we need to create a path where we expose Amanda Ghost as like the new Heidi Fleiss.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a leaked audio recording that has spread all over the internet and is now raising serious questions across several ongoing legal battles. The situation involves multiple people and different lawsuits, so it can feel confusing. But the main point is how this audio leak could affect the public perception of these cases. The recording that people are discussing allegedly features Jed Wallace, whose name has already appeared in connection with the dispute involving Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Even though he was previously mentioned in that case, he was later dismissed and is no longer a defendant. However, the leaked recording suddenly brought his name back into the spotlight. The audio itself reportedly surfaced through documents connected to another dispute involving Rebel Wilson and Amanda Ghost. According to reports, this audio was originally sealed by a federal judge because it had nothing to do with the claims being argued in the lawsuit involving Blake Lively. The judge determined that releasing the recording could potentially cause embarrassment or harm to individuals who were not even directly involved in the case, which is why it was ordered to remain confidential. Essentially, the court decided that since the recording did not relate to the actual arguments in the lawsuit, there was no reason for it to become public. However, things changed when that same recording later appeared in a different legal case filed in California. Once it was placed into that public court record, it quickly began circulating online, and people immediately started interpreting the clip without knowing the full context behind it. Some legal observers believe the release of this recording may have violated a protective order because certain rules require that anyone affected by confidential material must be notified before that information becomes public in many situations. The parties involved are supposed to receive advance notice and have an opportunity to object before sensitive evidence is disclosed in this situation. Reports suggest that the recording may have been provided during a deposition connected to the dispute between Rebel Wilson and Amanda Ghost. During that deposition, attorneys were allowed to ask questions, but only within a very limited scope. The judge specifically restricted the discussion to the creation, content, authorship, and purpose of a particular website that was connected to the dispute. Anything beyond those topics was technically outside the boundaries of what the court allowed during that deposition. Multiple objections were reportedly raised during the questioning because attorneys believed some questions were trying to push beyond the permitted scope. For example, there were attempts to ask broader questions about other clients or other work related to different cases, and those questions were immediately challenged by opposing lawyers who argued that such topics were not allowed under the judge's order. The defense attorneys repeatedly emphasized that the deposition was only supposed to focus on the specific website connected to the dispute and not on any unrelated cases or clients. Because of those restrictions, there were several moments where attorneys instructed the witness not to answer certain questions, believing that answering them would violate the court's instructions. Meanwhile, another major point being debated online is the claim that certain PR teams might run smear campaigns for their clients. Critics are trying to use this audio to suggest that such tactics exist. However, supporters of the defense argue that this interpretation is misleading. They say discussing strategy or website content does not automatically prove that anyone created a malicious campaign or fabricated accusations. Context matters, especially when short clips are pulled from longer conversations without the full explanation of what was being discussed. Another important factor is that even if someone worked on a specific website for one client, that does not automatically mean the same tactics were used for another client. Every legal crisis and every PR situation is handled differently, depending on the circumstances and the people involved. Supporters of the defense also point out that in the dispute involving Blake Lively, there has never been any evidence that a similar website or campaign was created against her. The only website connected to that case reportedly contains publicly filed court documents and a timeline of events which are part of the legal defense strategy rather than an attack campaign. Because of this, many legal analysts say the leaked audio may actually create more problems for the people trying to push the smear campaign narrative rather than helping them. If anything, the documents appearing in different cases show that evidence was preserved rather than deleted, which contradicts earlier accusations that certain parties were destroying or hiding information in the Lively dispute. Another major issue is how this leak might affect the jury pool. When evidence that was never meant to be public suddenly spreads across the internet, it can influence public opinion before a jury even hears the case. Judges often seal documents specifically to prevent this type of speculation because once information spreads online, it becomes impossible to fully control how people or legal background at the same time. Attorneys representing the affected parties now have the option to challenge the release of the material in court. If they believe the protective order was violated, they can request legal remedies or ask the judge to take action against anyone who improperly disclosed the information. This could potentially lead to new motions being filed as the courts decide whether the release of the audio broke any legal rules. There is also another layer to this situation because the party who introduced the recording is reportedly seeking additional discovery in the case. However, judges have already denied several earlier requests for broader discovery, including attempts to depose additional witnesses connected to the dispute. Some legal experts believe the recent filing may be part of a larger strategy designed to increase pressure on the opposing side by bringing more public attention to the controversy in high-profile legal battles. Publicity itself can sometimes become a negotiating tool because the more attention a dispute receives, the more pressure there can be on both sides to settle rather than continue fighting in court. However, that strategy does not always work, especially when the parties involved are confident in their legal positions. In fact, this entire situation could potentially backfire because the leak may now open the door for new legal challenges from the defense side. Attorneys representing the affected individuals could argue that the disclosure went beyond the limits set by the court, and they may ask judges to step in and enforce the original protective orders. If that happens, the focus could shift away from the claims being made in the lawsuit and toward whether the discovery process itself was abused overall. The biggest takeaway from this controversy is that multiple legal battles are overlapping with each other, and the public is seeing fragments of information from each one without always understanding how they connect. The disputes involving Rebel Wilson, Amanda Ghost, Blake Lively, and other parties are technically separate cases with different claims, different timelines, and different legal standards. Even though some lawyers or PR teams may appear in more than one situation, that does not automatically mean the facts of each case are the same. Courts evaluate each dispute independently based on the evidence and arguments presented in that specific case. Leaked audio has created likely involve responses from the attorneys representing the affected parties and possibly new filings addressing the release of the recording. If the court decides that any rules were violated, there could be consequences for the people responsible for putting the material into the public record. But that process will take time and will play out through official legal channels rather than internet speculation. For now, the situation remains fluid, and we will have to wait and see how the courts respond to this unexpected leak and what impact it ultimately has on the ongoing cases.